Take this moment to welcome the new town administrator to Sturbridge, effective April 1st, Mr. Jeff Bridges. Welcome. Okay. So we ready? We ready? Okay. First one, your budget overview. I just did it. While you were gone. Okay.
I just wanted to open up and thank you all for inviting me today. As you know, I'm coming very close to the end of my time here, and I really have enjoyed working for the town of Sturbridge. And I think the town and I appreciate the volunteers' help. And the town is very fortunate to have so many good professional people with department heads working for the community and making sure it stays on a straight and narrow. Barbara's going to give the overview, but I just wanted to say that at least I do know that the budget is balanced, and that it's a budget that is conservative in nature. Revenues are very much, we predicted very conservative numbers. The state really hasn't shown us any new additional funds, so we had to try to look very closely at the departments, and there was a lot of requests we'd like to give, but we couldn't do. But we did do the best we could, take into consideration that probably 60% of the revenues go to the schools, that we have the new revenues. And we had 2 contracts that we did settle this year while I was here, and that does have additional costs for the departments in public safety. We're almost done with the Department of Public Works contract, so this affects the budget as we try to put those funds into for next fiscal year. So Barbara has the particulars, and I'm here to help out if I can, and I just want to say thank you very much.
Thanks, Ted.
Okay. Well, Ted highlighted a lot of the information that I was going to highlight, but I will just say that the proposed budget totals $34,060,766, which is an increase of 4.2%, or $1,362,640. General government budget is going up by 5.3%. Burgess Elementary School 3.8%, Tantascwa 2.5%. The one thing that you should keep in mind as you review the budgets is, remember last year in the revenue, the 5-year forecast tab of the budget, I had highlighted last year that our expenditures were starting to go up at a greater rate than our revenues. And last year we had an excess levy capacity, when all was said and done and the tax rate was set, of $534,164. The budget that's presented has an excess levy capacity of $89,192. Now, that number is subject to change because it's very early in the budgeting process. As Ted just indicated, we don't know what the final numbers will be from the state. We only have the governor's budget at this point in time. Historically, the numbers from the governor are not, do not get lowered by the House and the Senate, and then in the final budget. The local revenues I've increased greater than we historically do. We tend to be a little bit more conservative on revenues, especially things that are due to fluctuations based on the economy. I was a little more aggressive because I was trying to balance the budget. When the process started, I was in the red, not the black. So I have increased those numbers. But my point is that if not for the fact that for the past several years we have not taxed to the levy, that we've had this excess levy capacity, the budget would not have balanced. We would have been looking at probably cuts. But because of the conservativeness of this town over the years, we are still okay. I am concerned for next year, as is indicated when you review the 5-year forecast. As Ted said, some of the issues this year that kind of drove the budget a little higher than normal would be the police department budget. They were working without a contract for 2 years. So the fiscal 20 budget reflects an increase in salaries based on 3 years. So it ends up being 9.5%. The fire department budget was also settled. They were working without a contract for 1 year. The budget driver in the fire department budget, however, is the SAFER grant that we received last year. We received 75% reimbursement for the entire year. In fiscal '20, it will be 75% for the first 6 months and only 35% for the second 6 months. Next year, we will receive only 35% for the first 6 months and then 20%, so that's in fiscal '21. So fiscal '21 is going to see a very large increase too, because that SAFER grant will be ending. And then for the third year in a row, we've received a large increase in the school, the education budgets. They went up $606,351. And so of the roughly almost $1,100,000 in new revenue, the school took over $600,000. So that is beginning to affect us. Pension costs continue to see increases about 7.5%. So that was about $75,000. The other thing I would caution you on as you start reviewing budgets is we were lucky this year that we got a low percentage increase for our health insurance. It was only 3.99%. But because we had implemented some changes to retiree health insurance, I did not have to increase that budget, and that is abnormal. We have been seeing double-digit increases in health insurance. So again, that kind of helped us this year, but next year, very doubtful that I'll be able to level that budget again. So that will be also something to keep in mind going forward. Also in your beginning of the budget book, I just want to go over quickly changes to staffing that are presented in the budget. There was 75 hours added to the administrative assistant in the conservation department. And this will basically allow, at this point in time, whenever the administrative assistant attends a meeting, she has to reduce the hours that she's actually physically in the office that week because she's only budgeted for 25 hours. This will allow her to continue to work those 25 hours in the office and then get compensated for hours at meetings. The Economic Development and Tourism Coordinator, well, we were always doing a split between the town and the STA for that position. In the 2020 budget, we are dividing the costs 50-50, so we're taking the salary and the benefits and dividing in half and funding both in both places, where prior to 2020, we were budgeting the salary 100% in STA and the benefits on the town side of the house. So that was something that I was asked to do, and I did. We're also recommending that a third custodian at 18 hours per week be budgeted for cleaning in all the town buildings. It's become clear over the past year that the staffing level is not sufficient to handle the cleaning in all of the buildings. There's, for instance, the library that's open 7 days a week, sometimes of the year, is not getting cleaning every single day. And, there's a lot of traffic going through. When, the buildings that are heavily trafficked by the public, cleaning of the bathrooms becomes an issue. So we think that adding the third custodian will help. Also with two, it's very difficult. If one is sick or on vacation, we really have nobody to fill the cleaning hours, because it is a part-time position. I already addressed the fire department staffing. The hours for the outreach coordinator at the senior center have been increased by 60 hours per year. This will allow 5 extra hours for a 12-week period. And the concern that I had heard at the senior center was during certain times of the year, specifically when the outreach coordinator is helping with fuel assistance applications, the workload increases, and so a lot of time the current employee has to flex her schedule for days when some seniors cannot meet until later in the afternoon, and it's not necessarily the schedule of the outreach coordinator. So we think starting with the additional hours for that 12-week period of time is a good first step to see how that works. Also, excuse me, as you know, during the current fiscal year, we came forth to request an increase in hours for the veterans agent position. That was endorsed by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee through a reserve fund transfer. So the budget reflects a minimum of 10 hours. We're continuing to keep it as a stipend position, but you will see an increase of a little over $4,000 in that line item. And then the final increase for staffing was the hours of the recreation director have been increased to 5 hours per week. It's a minimal cost of $6,760. They had requested that that position go full-time, but we think this is a good compromise, and I believe the Recreation Committee and the rec director are happy with what is being presented. You will note that I've indicated in the beginning of my budget overview that non-union increases are 3%. All non-union increases also take into consideration the step and grade that was endorsed for department heads. This will be the third fiscal year to move department heads through to get to the maximum of their grade, and then the non-union also, so that they can move through their grade system. And then as discussed previously, the police wages reflect the increase of 3.5%, the fire wages, an increase of 3% from the union contract. And as Ted mentioned, the DPW union, they are currently under negotiations for a new contract. Their contract will expire on June 30th. Also, you will note that in the budget as you go through, we put the Finance Committee, the line item budget that goes to town meeting. We have added the detail that was requested again for every salary to be outlined, so the department head salaries are there, and with the percentage increase, salaries and wages, overtime, et cetera. But we are going to ask, you'll notice as you go through, there's no line item for each of those lines. The line item is the total personnel costs. And I believe that basically gives what the Board of Selectmen wanted for the, the detail. It also allows us internally to be able to make transfers if we need to. The other budget that I did that to is the snow and ice budget. You'll still see a breakdown of purchase of service, overtime, and supplies, but I'm going to ask that town meeting vote just the total, because what we're finding is not all the line items are going over, but when you vote individually, you technically do have a deficit in that line. So by just voting the total, we won't have to worry about that, and same thing, we'll be able to move money around, but it still gives the detail.
It's a win-win.
It is a win-win. And then I would note that there were a lot of requests from departments for additional staffing. I tried to indicate in my budget overview what those were and whether or not they were supported by the town administrator. Appendix A gives you every single request that was made. I did not calculate what the cost of those requests would be. Obviously, we can do that if they are supported by the board or the finance committee, but also given that there's only an $89,000 surplus at this point in time, I don't think that that would be wise. And, yes,
In the detailed department budgets,
yes.
the column where it says department requested, there was something in Appendix A that you didn't include in.
So for instance, if a department had requested that their grade and wages be looked at and did not give me a figure of what they thought their wages should be, it is not reflected there, okay? Which is why I outlined, as you go and you read my overview, exactly what was requested, and then you'll see what they gave me if you refer back to the appendix. For instance, in the library, and they're going to speak in a minute, but they were looking for a new position. I was given the figure for that new position. So if you look at the library department head request, it is figured in there. But all the ones that are not, I was not given a number, or I did not put a number in, okay? And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So we have, we ready for Becky?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Becky Plimpton, Library Director, and typically you don't see us on your Saturday yearly meetings, but this year we felt that it was important to come and talk to you about why we requested an additional position in our budget this year. So if you look at our budget, everything is level service request, aside from one part, which is the request for a part-time, non-benefited library program coordinator position. So it'd be a 15-hour-a-week position. The library currently does approximately 300 programs a year with over 4,000 people that attend. And the coordination of these programs, the planning of the program itself, the hiring of a performer, the payment, the setup of the room, the public relations part, so press releases, social media, getting flyers made, getting flyers posted, the room set up, and then actually doing the performance that night, following up with the performer afterwards. So all of these things right now are currently done between 4 or 5 staff members. And honestly, sometimes it feels like it seems to work most of the time, but it always feels like we're flying by the seat of our pants. So we have one person who may be coordinating a children's program for one day, and in the process of scheduling that, we have someone else who's trying to do an adult program. We find out that we're both trying to do it on the same night or in the same week. And so having one person who can coordinate all of these things that the library is doing is extremely beneficial. It's become very clear that we can't really make it work very well the way that we've been doing it. So, in addition, we'd like to start a monthly email list. It's been a request for a while. We've had nobody to kind of coordinate that kind of thing, so that we can get information about our events and things out in another format as well. This position would also be a liaison to the Friends of the Library. The Friends currently give upwards of $12,000 a year towards all of our programming. The library budget from the town doesn't include any programming money. It all comes from the Friends of the Library.
Okay, anybody have questions for Becky? Joni?
Hi.
Did this go to Personnel Committee, the position? 'Cause
Yes.
When did it go?
In
And what, last month?
February? Yeah.
Why? Did I fall off that list?
Perhaps, I don't know. If they did, I'm sorry. Yep, blame me for that one.
Okay.
I'm actually going to copy. I'm sorry if I didn't. Keep
No
quiet.
worries.
Keep quiet.
I'm on the committee.
Okay.
The
We
job
did,
is,
just real quick, the committee did meet and did work on the job description and scored it accordingly. And, I'll be happy to share that with you. And
Okay.
hopefully you'll find that, you'll find similar in the scoring.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure it went through the committee, because that's always a question that comes up during the budget anyway. Right?
yes, yeah. So I had submitted this, actually when Leanne was here last September, and asked him to pass it on to personnel. It did get seen, as Ted mentioned, by the committee and approved, or graded in February.
The job description that I received after the Personnel Committee met is in the back, in Appendix A, and it was graded as a 4, which is consistent with what the other library assistant positions at the library are.
Other
And you said
questions?
this is to help with us programs that the library offers?
Yes.
And did I hear you say you offer 300 programs throughout the year?
300 a year, yep.
And the target audience or the age group for those programs?
Is runs the gamut. So we have our early literacy programs for, story hours and toddler babies. And then we have adult programs and teens in between, so runs the whole range.
I mean, they have, I mean, I've gone to some of the adult ones even. Of course, my kids were a little, but there is a huge range of programs if you look on their website now. You know, from Books on Tap, which is actually outside of the library at various restaurants in town, and for adult reading groups or book clubs or whatever you want to call it, to, you know, the littlest people. So it's a huge range, and they have some great speakers, and I guess I'm sounding like I'm promoting you here, but I mean, I am one of those people who do take advantage of
Are
them.
these things well received and used? That's great.
Yeah.
You know, if, you know, at some point you get the number of, is 300 the right number, or do we need to spend more money to be able to run 310, or are we okay with 300? So that's all helpful in the discussion. Thanks.
The other thing is that while the library runs 300 programs, the meeting room itself is used over 300 times a year, especially once the Bank in Town closed their community room. We saw an uptick in use of our meeting room, and so the coordination of that as well has been tricky.
If you were to be, if the town voted this position in, are you hoping to increase the 300 programs? Or is this just going to be to maintain the status quo? Or with a coordinator, would you try to go to, I don't know, 350 or?
No, I think we'd be able to increase it. Like I said, right now, I think we all feel a little scattered, so it's tricky to juggle the 300 that we're doing now, but I think that we'd actually be able to do more.
Anybody else? What's that?
I should have introduced before. These are trustees for the library. Jackie Belisle, who's the chairperson, and Joyce Sennett.
Hi.
I don't know if you wanted to say anything.
We support her request entirely. We are all aware as trustees of all the programs that go on, and many of us attend them. Enjoyable programs for all ages, from pajama day to reading groups. It's a very vast array of programs, and I can understand the difficulty of having that, not having one person responsible for it means that a lot of things can fall, especially double booking rooms or whatever. So yes, the trustees support this request.
One of the things in our strategic plan that came out this past year is a better interaction with other departments and organizations in town. And I think that this position would also be able to better do that.
I guess the only other thing I would add is you talked about an email list. I'm familiar with many of those that are kind of self-supporting. There's a way to enroll versus having somebody put you on there and get off there. So maybe the IT person we have in town could find a way to make that run a little smoother and not necessarily take up a lot of staff time on your end there.
Right. The setup of the email list wouldn't be the issue. It would actually being creating the content for it. That would be the part that would be the time-consuming part.
Are the majority of programs something you have to go out and book and find, or is it people coming to you with requests and you then booking them?
We have, people send us things all the time, whether it's through email or through regular mail, saying, hey, I'm a performer and I do this or whatever. We go through those, but we also get recommendations from other libraries or maybe that have had programs. So we do a lot of searching based on what we think, our patrons and people in Sturbridge would be interested in.
So would that be a primary role with this coordinator as well, to actually
Yes.
take the time to do the background and find content to bring in?
Yep, definitely. Yep. And I'm also hoping that, there are small grants and things that are available that we haven't been able to take advantage of. We've been able to do some of the Cultural Council grants and things like that, but there are some programming things above and beyond. As I mentioned, because the Friends, do fully support our programming budget, it would be nice to be able to, to have performers that maybe were a little more expensive, that could be supplemented with outside, grant funding.
Good.
And these programs are no cost to the people who participate in those?
Correct. The only time that we charge, there's one program that we charge for. It's called Stewing Over Mysteries. We hold it at the Public House once a year. We get a big-time mystery author to come and speak, and there's also a dinner involved. So the Friends do supplement the cost of the ticket so that we can make it as affordable as possible for people to attend. It has sold out the last 5 years with a max of 85, but that's the only program that we charge for.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm interested in your comment about, outreaching to other departments. What comes to mind is several years ago, the Senior Center had a very vibrant book club, and that's kind of faded because, I believe, because of lack of, organization and leadership. Could this position help organize a book club at the Senior Center or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, it used to be in the afternoon, and so seniors could get out and enjoy reading books and that sort of thing. So that particular came to mind when you mentioned outreaching to other departments.
Yeah, the partnership between the library and the senior center makes a lot of sense. We have a lot of crossover in our patrons and people who use those services. So I think a greater partnership between the two of us would be beneficial for everyone.
Anyone else? All set? Becky, are you all set? Anything else? No?
No?
Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
He's not here, but I can fill in.
Go ahead.
So while we're waiting for Butch to come in, I don't know if anybody has any specific questions about any of the budgets. Mike?
I said I was going to be quiet today.
Then never mind.
So you said there's a general wage increase of 3%, and for department heads and others, there's also the steps. So people will look at some individual line items to see some very large increases there. What's the basis for the 3%? If I recall, that's the number we used last year. If I look at what I hear some other towns doing,
Last year was 2.5 for non-union.
Thanks. If I look at what private companies are doing yet again this year, 3% feels like it's a very generous number. 2.5, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 is the number that I constantly hear and it comes to my mind. So, how do we get to 3%? How do we justify using a 3% number? And what would be the impact of a 0.5% change on that in the overall budget? It's probably nickels and dimes.
I guess the primary reason has to do also with, as I said, we negotiate 2 contracts. We're looking at a 3rd contract. We try to reflect the non-union people to have similar cost of living increases as the other contracts. Some of the drive to the increase also has to do with a change in work conditions. We negotiated to go from a weekly to a biweekly pay and direct deposit for all the employees. And this is to help save extra work in our treasurer and accounting departments. And it was beginning to get to the point where doing it every week, the payroll was getting more time consuming, and it might require additional help to avoid that, and to go with something that's more regular with how other communities that have biweekly. We negotiated. It was actually started by Leon to negotiate that. Unfortunately, a change in that kind of job condition oftentimes has a situation where you find you have to compensate a bit more to have the public safety collective bargaining especially agree to it. With that, we try to be consistent with the non-union people, and hence we have that 3%. Otherwise, I think it would have been a little lower too.
And the bargaining contracts that we have in place, how many years are those? And what are the general percent increases over the terms?
It's in the 3% range for, they're all, the two contracts that are settled were 3 years. The police, as Barbara said, was 2 years in making, so it has 1 more year to go, and that was 3.5. And the fire department, it's last year, this year, and next, or this year, next year, and the year after, it is 3, 3, 2.5. And the DPW were currently in our negotiations.
Butch Jackson is here. Okay. Mr. Jackson, you want to come forward?
Actually, Butch, if you want to sit at that one. So for any of you that don't know, Butch Jackson is our new DPW director. He's been on the job for about a month. So he's here to answer any questions that you have on his budget, as well as he can address any of the items for his department in the capital budget. And Butch, if there's anything you want to start with, feel free.
No, the budget seems pretty straightforward. There's only looks like only one increase in the machinery maintenance for $1,000, and that's basically due to cost of parts and oil and all that stuff goes up every year, and I believe this has been level funded for quite a while. Other than that, it looks fairly straightforward. The only other thing I would talk about a little bit is the capital. The one thing that I haven't had a chance to talk to Barbara about is the II study. We put in an II study for, it was actually due a year ago, but we had an extension here, and we put it in this December. It hasn't been approved or denied yet, but if, at what point, whatever point it gets approved, we're gonna have to do cammering our sewer system, and then we'll have to be making repairs as we go along, depending on what that proposal that Tiger Bond sent in lays out. So I'm not really sure how that's gonna play out, but I'll have more information on that, as soon as I can dig into that a little deeper.
Could I ask you a question about the, in the capital and the betterment? So in the capital, you're getting a utility tractor with mower deck and snow blower, and in betterment, you're getting a lawn tractor with a mower deck. What exactly is
Should be one
the...
item. It's a tractor with the mower deck, a snow blower, forks, and a couple other attachments. It's all one item.
Oh, so is this just additional funding in the beautification, or the...
Well, it's the trail committee
Betterment.
requested the tractor, and I'm looking for the snow blower attachment for the sidewalks. We're doing the sidewalks now from South of Broadway to Brimfield.
Oh, so you're not actually getting two?
No.
He is
No.
getting two.
Huh?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He's getting one in capital. The one in capital is the one that the Trails Committee had requested.
Okay.
And they had initially requested a utility tractor with a mower so that they could cut the sides of the trail that were overgrowing into the walkway, is my understanding. And then recently, the Board of Selectmen decided that the DPW was going to get rid of the snow on the sidewalks on Route 20 and 131 during snowstorms. So Butch had come forward requesting a snow blower, but then in reviewing the request from the Trails Committee, he indicated that they would be able to take that and add an attachment to it to also be able to do the sidewalks. So it seemed to make more sense to buy that one piece of equipment. And then Tom Chamberlain came forward and stated that there had been a request made on many occasions that if they could remove the snow from the trails, then people would be able to utilize them during the winter months. And obviously, it wouldn't be all the trails, but certain sections of trail. So it seemed to make more sense that instead of buying a separate snow blower, that we just add the attachments to this one, and it could be used for multiple purposes. The lawn tractor with mower in the betterment budget, I believe, is just I think it's for mowing the grass, but I'll tell you in a sec.
Cemeteries.
So when we talk utility tractor, we're talking like a small Kubota type machine or something?
I'm completely unfamiliar with the second one. The tractor with the It's more of a, like a Kubota, that's the bigger one, that's the one with the snow blower attachment. But it does have a mower deck on the back. It's part of the bid. And that was for the sidewalks, the one that Barb was talking about, I'm familiar with that one.
So, John Deere tractor, it's for lawn and grounds maintenance. So I believe it's just a,
Yeah, like I said, I never even saw that one. That must have been put in before I got here.
yeah, well, everything, pretty much everything happened before you got here, which is at a little bit of a disadvantage, so, but he's coming up to speed fast. This is a tough time of year to start, for sure.
So there's a need for actually two things that in some respects are doing the same thing? I mean, I know obviously the one from Betterment is not doing the snow blowing and all that, but. Oh, okay.
Yeah, without going through a summer of the grass here, I really can't tell you if we need it or not. Greg apparently thought we needed it. I'm sure he knows what he's talking about. But I do know we had one guy last night mowing the grass, and I did hear a lot of sort of complaints that it was got a little behind last year with just the one guy. So we budgeted for 2 summer help this summer, so the extra tractors sure will come in handy.
We can look into that a little bit more with staff and get back to you during your meetings. Yeah,
You want this back?
yeah, please.
There are 2 different types of machines. I can see, one does fields, one does grass, but. So you look like you're ready to leave for some reason, but one of the topics that has come up in the last couple of years on this department is staffing. How many are we budgeting for? How many do you actually have over there? Are we fully staffed finally?
We have one more hire. We have 3 applicants. It's going to start the interview process this Wednesday, and that will be the last one, and we're fully staffed.
We did just have some recent retirements in the department, so we're still in the process of replacing from those retirements. The Board of Selectmen, just at their meeting on Monday night, approved the promotion of 2 current employees to different positions. And so now that those have been approved, now it creates, from one of those people being promoted, it creates the position that Butch is talking about.
I
And
should
that-
clarify, as far as I know, we're up to, I don't know what the full staff means. I mean, what was the number 2
So
years
we are-
ago? I don't
yeah,
know, but
so
from
we
what
are
I
that-
understand, we have
yeah,
one more.
the position, the filling of the laborer driver position puts you back to the full staffing.
And that's all in this budget?
Yes.
And what about the condition of the DPW barn itself? It seems like we've heard that over the years, that
Well, we're
there's.
redoing the roof over the office area, but it's another thing I haven't really had a chance to look at. I mean, it seems, compared to where it came from, it's very big, which is good. But I know it's been there since at least the early 70s. But I'd have to take a look at that.
Oh, and that was on the capital plan to find a replacement, but at this point in time, there's no immediate plans to replace.
I know, we talk about it a lot.
We do. Every year, we seem to have that conversation.
That's one, actually, one of the goals of the Board of Selectmen is to try to.
Prioritize.
So if Kevin were here, he'd say, we got a study out for a new DPW barn, the senior center, there's like 3 or 4 major infrastructure projects out there we're waiting for studies on. Since we're trying to fill some time here, is there any update on where those are, when we might see those and have to start factoring things into our budgets?
Yes, there will be articles, actually, to continue the studies for the parks and senior center for the facility. There's going to be an article for looking at the current facility for the senior center to see if it could be expanded. That had begun but wasn't finalized in the fall. The seniors came to the Board of Selectmen and asked about a possible article, and we asked at that time to wait till the spring to get more information. And that, so there'll be an article for that. to determine if it is feasible to expand where they are. There's also an article with the Recreation Committee looking at 60 and 70 Cedar Street for a possible shared use. There was some discussion, both boards have talked to see if there's a possibility of utilizing those properties both for recreation and seniors. And recreation is also interested in using the land for expansion of recreation. So you will be seeing articles for the spring town meeting that you'll be reviewing that will deal with that, both those areas.
I think, especially our chair, the chair of the Board of Selectmen has stated several times that the Board of Selectmen, the town in general, has to prioritize the major capital projects that we're facing, like DPW, like safety complex, like senior center, and perhaps, one or two smaller projects. But we have to prioritize them and schedule them on our overall capital plan so they don't all come at one time.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's also one of the goals that we agreed to.
Yep.
For
Yes,
one of the,
it was.
every year, as you know, we have goals for the town administrator.
Right.
So I'll follow on Jeff. So it's definitely on our radar with respect to the DPW and also the public safety building. We're asking the new town administrator to look into those, and I don't want to echo what Mike said, but it is a goal as well.
Butch, when you first sat down, you mentioned something about an ion study, or?
It's an infiltration study for the sewer system. Sewer system is fairly old. I think it was back in the 60s. It was put in the most of it, a big part of it. And with the sewer system, it's a collection system. So any breaks, or not really a break, but any gaskets that are loose or manholes that are starting to fall apart, water will get in and it gets into the sewer system. We have to treat that, so we have to pay for that. So it's kind of to our advantage to minimize that. And the DEP in 2018 mandated all the municipalities to put a proposal in as what you're going to do to take care of your II.
Okay.
We did that. We got an extension, I understand, so we did it in 2019. We put the proposal in, but we don't have an answer yet as if they accepted it. But once they do, then it's going to be like a phased job. We're going to have to do a certain amount of work on this every year.
So this is going to be a new expense that we're going to have to consider.
It is.
Is that expected to pay for itself over time? Is that part of the proposal?
Well, where I came from, what we did there was we did a rate study, and we included it in the rate study, the costs. And we actually went up a little bit on the sewer rates, but I'm not sure how you want to handle it here.
So typically, any costs related to water or sewer are billed directly to the water or sewer customers. And so, as Butch said, if the added cost, there would be a rate increase. However, there would also be the flexibility to use the fund balance in both the water and the sewer fund. So in this case, it's sewer related, so in the sewer fund him sitting down today mentioning is the first I'm aware of it. So, I'm not sure what the cost is, and I don't think he is either at this point in time. So we would definitely have to take a look at that and figure it out as we go forward. But that type of expense would not typically be part of the budget that we're reviewing today.
Well, as you mentioned, it sounded like the whole purpose would be a cost savings measure over the long term. Do you have any way to quantify?
No, because I don't know what the infiltration is. If we have none, then we won't have to do much work, and it won't be much of a savings to us. But if we have a lot, we will have to do a bit of work, but it'll be a significant savings.
The only thing I wish to add is I believe this is also something that the state requires.
Yes.
That we do follow, all towns know what their I&I, which is basically leaks in your pipes and infiltration, which could cause damage to the environment. So that's why towns are being required to do this with their permits. And we also, as a goal, and we'll have a request for a rate study for next fiscal year as well. So we should go hand in hand.
Some contractors do this type of
Yes,
study?
there's several, yes. Weston and Sampson, Bond, VHB, they all do this kind of work.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Anything? Go ahead,
One
please.
question. Can you, there's a difference of about $5,000 between what was requested for plowing contractors, increase from last year. Is there any?
In the overtime account?
No.
Not in the overtime, no.
Oh, in the purchase of service for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Greg had requested an increase of $5,000. We had just increased that slightly over the past fiscal years. At the time I was actually putting the budget together, we did not have a deficit in that account, so I did not increase it. But that's what you're asking, the difference between the department head request and the administrators, yeah. The only account we increased for snow and ice for next fiscal year is the overtime budget, because we're trying to keep up with, the actual overtime budget is for employees, and so we're trying to increase that incrementally to cover the CPI, cost of living adjustments, or the union contracts. And that's unknown at this point, but I did build something in.
Anything else, anybody? Butch, anything else from you?
I'm still digging in.
Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you very much.
So I can fill in again if there's any other questions on areas of the budget. I would say, too, that Mike's left the room, but I did look yesterday to see what the CPI was, and it was 3%, just as a point of reference.
3% where?
Boston, the index that we use.
Year to date or last year?
I looked at it yesterday. Yeah, I looked at it yesterday, so between last year and this year. You can check it out for me, Jim.
I did. I have it right here.
And what did you get? And what did you get?
What's that?
And what did you get?
Did you get a different number?
Year to date through February, 1.1. The prior 12 months. February last year.
I'll show you what I did in my office. I don't have it with
And
me.
last year for the year to date through June, which is for the Northeast, it was 2.6. I made it specific to the New England region.
I did Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jim, can I'm going to ask, can we have a copy, or can I have a copy of that so I can make it for the board too? Thank you. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, we typically use the Boston one. Historically, we've used the Boston one because we do provide, we have to increase some costs for, like for instance, the OSV, the pilot every year, and that's the indicator that we use is the Boston, not New England.
And I was nonspecific. It says here Mid-Atlantic, but I went in, I underlined, it says Northeast.
Okay,
So that would be New England, New York, Long Island.
yep.
Okay. Thank you,
And I
Jim.
just did it yesterday, too,
Thanks.
because I'm bored.
I try to be prepared for you.
I appreciate it. Do you have
So
fill-in?
I have a couple things. On the line item budget for, so under the tab for FinCom handbook, the town planner, which is, few pages in. The total for the town planner.
Wait, hang on a second.
Okay, sorry.
Where are you? How many pages in?
I think it's 4.
Oh, I see, okay.
You got it?
Yeah. It's line item 39, around there?
Yes.
Okay.
So the personnel costs is correct at $131,796. There is a missing line, though, so under salaries and wages, insert the word longevity, and it would be $300. The total does not change, and Joni, when I give you the spreadsheet, I obviously have fixed it. No, I'm gonna give it to you, because there was a lot of changes. Yep, yep.
That's fine.
No,
don't know,
Yeah.
about the fourth page.
No, the
It's
line item
town-
numbers will not change because we're only voting the total for personnel costs, so
Yeah,
there will
but
be no
it-
line
it-
item.
This is a sheet she says is wrong.
So everybody good with that? And then
11,751.
there was one other item that I did miss. We are due to have our OPEB study, so this is going to be the second to the last page in that section. There's 0 budgeted. I'd like to add 7,500 to that.
I think three of us lost you. Where are we again?
The second to the last page, under unclassified, and it's the line that says OPEB study.
It's 147.
Unclassified.
Auditing requirement, audit.
Looks like 147.
Sorry?
An auditing, for an audit, it's OPEB study. It's a requirement that the town has to do. Unfortunately, I think Barbara thought it was another year out initially.
Can you put the amount again?
Excuse me?
Can you tell me the amount again?
7,500.
7,500.
Yes. Apparently, time flies, and it's time again.
Was it every 2 years?
So the bottom number is right. She just is
Ted,
missing the
it's every
longevity.
2 years it has to be an audit?
Yep.
No, the
Okay.
bottom number is right. She said it's just missing from the sheet,
That it's every
Again, I
two,
was wrong.
yeah.
which we can find if I go to the detailed department budget for the town plan, huh?
You have anything else?
I should have brought,
So does anybody, Chief Ford should be here momentarily, but does anyone have any other items or questions on any of the other budgets?
I do.
Questions for the board?
I noticed that there's now salaries for the
See, it's included. in
Board of
the-
Selectmen. We did quite a study, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that was Ted's, that was not ours. That was Ted. We did not put that
Put
in.
you on the hot seat as
Well, you know,
your...
it's not a hot secret. I really do believe the Board of Selectmen, you know, who do put a lot of their own time into the community, should have a stipend for what they do for the town. This is in many communities have stipends for the selectmen. It's not a great amount, but, you know, I do know they have to go to different functions in which they utilize not only their time, but their money to pay for that. And I believe that the Board of Selectmen for a community like Sturbridge should have some type of stipend to say thank you for the time and effort they put into the community. Not saying you don't have time and effort, but they really do have to go to functions and other kind of meetings that cost funds that the town doesn't always compensate for. They might go for the large committee meetings, but they don't for all the small things. And so that's why I put it in. I really do believe this board, the town, should consider a small stipend as a thank you for the hard work they do. That's it.
Kathy,
Our
we,
neighbors to the east does have a stipend system.
well,
Right, they do.
Yeah.
Many,
Mary
many,
said-
many
Mary
commu-
said-
almost most communities in Massachusetts have stipends for the board.
Mary said, our chair said that when Ted brought it up, we haven't talked about it as a board, really, haven't had a major discussion, but she had said that when she went to the MMA conference, Sturbridge was about one of the only towns, there was very few towns where they didn't have a stipend, and that's what Ted felt it was. As a
couldn't
board,
feel
we
strongly.
haven't discussed it, so I can't tell you, I don't even know where the board sits on this. I couldn't tell you.
The board was
had that-
reluctant, but I really do believe it should be.
We had that 20 years ago. We always had one, and then we kind of went through a period where budgets were getting a little tight. There was a little
Well, the problem was with insurance,
selectmen
too.
and some other groups coming in here, and there's a line of thought, well, if I don't take the stipend, then maybe I'll avoid whatever the issues are, and then, so I agree. It makes sense to have a stipend in there. If an individual doesn't want to accept a stipend, they can just throw it
Sure.
back to free cash, but.
They had the study a few years ago, and they was brought up to the town, and the town voted it down. And this isn't that many years. I want to say 6 years?
No, it was probably
Less?
3.
Okay, so it's less than,
I thought it was around 14, because I was on that.
I was the,
yeah,
no,
she
I
was.
I was the board representative on the stipend review
And I was the
committee.
FinCom
With
rep.
Don Fairbrother, God rest his soul. And it was not 2 or 3 years ago, because
I
it
think
was
it
a
was-
different board.
Thought it was.
Tom Creamer was the chair. It was at least 4 to 5 years ago. It was definitely when Sean was
I
here.
think it was, I want to say it was, because I think I got on finance in 13, and So I think it was 14.
So
I was the
that's,
finance
that's
committee
5,
rep.
6 years ago.
It's 5
Yeah.
years. and-
Yeah,
Five.
I know it's more than 4, because it hasn't been since I've been on.
They
The
did.
town did vote it down,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. The town voted it down, and I think that might, I think we did talk about that with Ted, too. But I know when we sit down and go through this ourselves, I don't know what the end result will be. Like I said, we haven't really talked about it, so I don't even know, I don't even have a pulse to where it is.
I know the previous community that I retired from, during the recession back in '08, '09, the stipends were frozen and taken away from the boards. Within 2 years, though, it was put back into the budget. So, like I said, communities do this. It's common practice. They put time and effort. I really think the community should think about, at least, if it may have turned it down once, at least bring it again. I think conditions in economies are never perfect, but I think it might be a situation where the community may look at it again and hopefully be favorable. So I'd ask you to support it. I'd ask the board to support it. As much as they don't, they're not keen. It's not their idea, it's my idea, so.
Yeah, it did not originate from us.
Right? That's all. And that's the reason why.
Barbara, anything? Anybody else?
And for the record, FinCom can't be paid by law.
Right, right.
But I guess I was pointing out, we also appreciate your time and effort that you put into it, even though you're unable to do it.
Yeah, it's not enough to make or break anybody's decision. They're doing it wrong. It's just a matter of, can bleed a little bit out, and here's waiting.
Barbara, do you have anything? Should we just take a break till he shows up? Why don't we take
Not a bad idea.
quick coffee break, and he'll be here by then. Yeah. Sounds good, right?
Sounds like a perfect idea.
Happy spring.
Yeah, I'm pretty long-winded.
Anytime, Chief.
Okay, good morning.
When you're ready, good morning.
Any preference on an order for betterment
Any way you want.
capital operations?
Any way you want.
Well, I guess we'll jump right into the operations side then. The general increases to our budget for fiscal 2020 are born out of the recent collective bargaining agreement. There may be one modification that I want to make to the overtime side, and that is for the new SRO position. We included that into our overtime, accounting for 10 holidays, 3 personal days, and 10 vacation days, 3 personal days, and 11 holidays being accounted for as needing coverage. And where it's the SRO position, they're not going to need coverage for that, so I'll get together with Barbara and see if we can reduce that by approximately $4,700 for the overtime. Every year, as you know, I put together this manpower proposal and plead my case for additional help on the police department side, and I did the same and a sense of urgency at the special town meeting this year when we approved the new SRO position for Tantascwa and an additional dispatcher. We put on 5 new part-time dispatchers to try to fill the gap, and I'll certainly tell you now that it's a Band-Aid for a bigger issue. Our regional dispatch that didn't go through would have helped cure our dispatching deficiencies. We're still going to maintain and have dispatcher issues where we are operating a public safety answering point where all the 911 calls come in, and we need to have 2 dispatchers on duty at all times, specifically for the day and evening shifts. And currently, we are not staffing at that level. We have probably 40% of the shifts covered regularly with 2 dispatchers, and we are trying to augment those voids with the part-time dispatchers that are coming in utilizing state 911 grants. So it's certainly something that we're going to have to pay attention to, because we are, as you'll hear or have heard from the fire chief, they've got calls that are everything that goes up in public safety goes up and goes through the dispatch center. Any calls for service, no matter what they are, always end up through the conduit, which is our public safety dispatch, whether it's for our 911 calls for service, whether it's a traffic accident, a lockout, somebody's fire alarm going off, somebody's basement that's flooding. All these calls for service are transferred through our dispatch center and go to the appropriate public safety agency. So to say it's fragile at best, what we have up there, I've watched and I've spoken about it before, how destructive it's become for the men and women that are working in that center. The time that they're having to put in each week in the special town meeting, I told you that they were averaging 60 hours a week. That won't change very much, because in that dispatch center, most of the fill rates are at 100%, meaning that anybody has to take a day off, has to be filled. And if we didn't have part-time personnel available, then the full-time people have to take those shifts. And by the order of the collective bargaining agreement, the full-time dispatchers have first right of refusal of those shifts. And so just be aware that some of the increases in overtime or some of the other personnel requests that we have, you know, I think that we need to at least add, or we should have 10 dispatchers up there to effectively run the show properly. Or we should commit to researching regional dispatch again. I just think that it's something that needs to be heard, something I ask for annually, and something that I hope that we take a serious look at.
Tom, could you just clarify that you're asking for 10, but could you just let everybody know
It'd be
how many you have?
four
Just
additional,
just so they understand.
4 additional full-timers, so that we have 10 in total.
Tom, does your budget reflect that now?
It does not.
Okay.
It does not. The budget that I had submitted was for level services with a few minor increases.
Okay.
And just a question regarding dispatch. So is there any way to quantify what we're paying right now in terms of overtime, because you have to fill in with our existing people to cover the shortfall?
The short answer is yes, there is a way.
Compare that to what the salary.
There is a way. The short answer is yes, there is a way to quantify it. However, the long answer is it won't satisfy the problem. Because I don't think that the more people are going to reduce the overtime. I think it's having a hardy work group there that's able to absorb the needs of that public safety communication center.
And I'm just looking for how much closer does it get us to where we need to be, in terms of we're already spending a certain amount of money to cover our shortfall, and if we know what that is, what will it take to get the rest of the way home?
I see.
It's kind of the way I was looking at it.
Those numbers I can produce, and I will not, and I cannot make a promise that it's going to reduce overtime costs.
I understand.
It may actually increase the overtime costs, because you're going to have more people there. So those, if we're mandating the two persons on at all times to be there, those shifts are going to have to be filled. And I've never had the opportunity to have a green light to say, okay, here's what you need, here's what you have, let's put together a budget for that. It's always been something that I've asked for, and I believe this is the 13th or 14th time that I've been able to come before this joint budget meeting and express my concerns, and in those 13 years, we've increased our staff by 2 at the dispatch center, which has been very helpful, and I don't want to not seem grateful for that, but I just want you to know that it's not getting any easier, and, you know, the fire department still has that NFPA standard 1221 that requires, if a fire department is also doubling as emergency medical services, and that their dispatch center is required to have 2 persons on at all time if they're providing emergency medical dispatch, which is the pre-arrival instructions that are given to the ambulance and to the responding police officers there. While you have that person on the phone, our dispatchers are CPR first responder certified as well as emergency medical dispatch certified. So they're providing help to those people through instructions over the telephone while the emergency services are on their way. And so that NFPA standard requires that you have 2 people, 2 public safety communicators on desk at the time that those calls are coming in. And I just think it's something we need to take a very, very strong look at
And
sooner
Chief,
than later.
the estimated cost for a dispatcher is?
Probably per person about 54,000 all told.
Yeah, so if we needed 4 extra dispatchers, it'd be about 216, 220,000, some.
Approximately, I would feel more comfortable actually calculating it out.
Yeah.
Forgive me because I've never been asked. I've always done 2 budgets. I've always done here's what I need, the Tom Ford budget, and then here's what I have to submit budget, and I didn't do that this year. Otherwise, I would have had all those numbers readily available for him, but I could have those numbers by week's end next week. Yeah.
I have a question. I think you said right now, 40% of the time, the day and night shift has 2 dispatchers. You're able to
Yes.
cover it 40% of the time?
Yes.
Right? I mean, okay. So with 1 additional dispatcher, how does that change the percentage, would you say, in terms of having coverage both day and night with 2? I know you want 4. I'm just curious what 1 does. Does it go to 50%?
Well,
60%?
I wouldn't be able to do that math for you without first looking at the schedule, the dispatch schedule, and then walking the schedule out for 6 weeks and determining there's so many variables that are involved because of the dispatch.
Oh, I know you can't answer it now off your cuff, but.
We have dispatchers with 20 years and we have some with 20 weeks. And how much vacation time, how much holiday time, how much personal time, sick time that these dispatchers have. So I have to be able to take that and formulate that to include in with the perfect scenario, that scenario where, okay, nobody's taking any time off for 6 weeks.
I get it, but I just think having a
How much
rough
coverage do we
idea
have?
is useful, because I don't think that it'll happen, like you get all 4, like you got 1 at special town meeting.
Yes.
And if we were to increase it 1 at a time, it would be good to know how that affects coverage in terms of having both. I know you can't answer it right now, because you want to be very precise, but if you want 4, and that will get you to 100% coverage for day and night with 2, then, maybe 10 or 20% increase in coverage with 1. Because I just feel like we're probably going to increase the dispatches 1 at a time.
Probably a 15% increase each time then, right?
Yeah,
If
I
we're
don't
gonna
know.
go-
That's what I was going through my head, but I didn't know if that sounded reasonable or not.
It does. I would feel more comfortable
Right.
before presenting it to you
I
that
get
way,
it.
to actually look at the numbers.
I get it.
Yeah,
It's a
Maybe I'd like to see it
real
a
rough
couple,
estimate.
It's a
couple
rough
ways.
estimate.
Here's your current staffing. You said, I think it's 6 FTEs plus a bunch of part-timers.
6
And-
full-time public safety dispatchers, and currently we have 7 part-time dispatchers, 5 of which are brand new in training.
Okay. So with the current staffing, here's what you get for costs and coverage. If you had your ideal budget of 10 FTEs, how many additional part-times, and what you get for coverage, and then maybe we can figure out halfway in between what we get for increased costs and and
And
coverage
I hope to keep the
levels.
part-time staff there. Obviously, it reduces the overtime costs.
Yep.
And and maximizes the availability to have that second dispatcher on at all times, even when the vacation and holiday coverage and personal day coverage is necessary.
So while you're there, I guess I'd like to have some feedback from the selectmen, and I don't want to pose this question argumentatively, but I think Chief's got the easiest budget to do. He takes last year's memo, just updates the date, asks for, you know, a detective, one other staff person, the dispatch people, and we never seem to add staff to support these issues that he raises year after year. Yet we increased the building inspector's hours a year or two ago because of the increased workload and his position affecting public health and safety. We're looking at adding custodial staff to you know, keep the buildings clean. You know, staff over at the library for additional programs for folks. Yet we constantly hear this concern about overworking staff who's directly impacts public health and safety in the community on a day-to-day basis here. So I'm just trying to understand why we don't seem to be adding positions there, but we're adding them elsewhere. In, you know, if you only had a limited amount of money, which is the most, where should we prioritize the adding of staff? And maybe we give up a couple, or don't run a couple of extra programs at the library, but we have a little extra coverage at the safety complex.
Yeah, I don't, can I address
Yeah,
that?
please.
I understand where you're coming from, and safety is important to me as well, but we did, FinCom and the board and town meeting added a position at special town meeting. We added a dispatcher. So I think we're moving in that direction. And it is unusual, I think, at special town meetings to add positions. We usually do it at the annual budget. So I think that we did respond. And we also voted in the SRO to fund the SRO for the rest of the fiscal year. So I think those are two key positions that we did address at the STM. I don't disagree that he needs more, but I just wanted to point out for even people who are watching that we did add those two positions at the last STM.
I agree with what you said. I think you raised a very good point. If I personally, I'm going to speak just for myself, if I had personally had to make a choice that I add a detective or I add hours to the library or recreation or whatever, I would opt for public safety for obvious reasons, if the budget were tight. If I had to make the choice, and I had and was told you got either this or this, because he keeps on asking for the chief keeps on asking for this detective, and if it helps them resolve situations that they need to resolve, then I think somewhere along the line we have to do it, and you know, people say sometimes, there's a big fallacy among many people that, oh, this is Sturbridge, nothing happens here. And yet, when you read the reports, it's far from the truth. It is far from the truth. It's a nice little town, don't get me wrong, and it's a safe little town. But there's a reason it's safe. And I think that, I agree with your comments, well taken. Larry?
I do recall when Chief Ford was made chief and made his first appearance before the Finance Committee 14 or 15 years ago. He explained that he was then starting to attend various meetings of chiefs, and he would hear something like this. Well, in my town, what I got to do, if I really need 6, I ask for 8, and if lightning strikes, I get 2. Then the Chief Ford made a pledge, which, as far as I can tell, he has kept every single year in all matters involving the basis of that pledge, which was, if I need 3, I will ask for 3 and justify it. If it's any other number, I will justify any other number. I will not mark it up so that you guys can mark it down. and everybody sort of feels like they've done something. I'm paraphrasing in that last sentence. The chief didn't actually put it that way. A second thought, which really piggybacks on yours. Look always to consequences, because that's where everybody lives. And having a further program in a department is all to the good. What is the consequence of not having that? But what is the consequence of having a trainee dispatcher who cannot walk, a very nervous young father to be, and a petrified mother to be for that vital moment? So, looked at that way, I honestly understand the questions, but I don't see a basis for a debate. The thing is evident on its face, the request.
I'd like to add, though, I think it would be important for people to hear what happens if you have a dispatcher tied up, assisting a young family, and another call's coming in. What happens?
The way that the system's set up, if it's a 911 call, there's an automatic rollover. We have rollover community, so the call will not go unanswered. The calls that will go unanswered are your general service calls. The phone will continue to ring. That public safety dispatcher will stay on the line with that particular emergency and let the regular incoming lines ring away, and they'll keep cycling through, and they won't stop ringing. However, if any 911 calls come in, they'll be transferred over. Our rollover is Southbridge Police Department. So Southbridge Police and Fire and EMS will get those calls on a rollover. So they will be answered. If they're not picked up at a certain number of rings, they automatically go to the next PSAP.
Do we have a similar agreement with Southbridge?
Yes.
Be their rollover?
Yes, each community has a rollover community attached to it. There's redundancy built into the public safety answering point. So even if the second, there's a third, and fourth, so the call will be answered. It's the way that the system is set up.
Have we had to answer other towns in the past? Is it?
Yes. And other towns have had to answer for us as well. I want to thank you for the kind words and the support. And from the first days, it was, I think, only 13 years ago, but thanks.
You look so young.
I was, here it go. It was public safety that I was focusing on, and I wasn't thinking about personnel the first probably 5 or 6 years. And as those 13 years have gone away, all of a sudden personnel became a bigger issue. I started to have people that I had cautioned probably 4 or 5 years ago about how people were starting to break and how fragile our membership was becoming because of the stress that they were under. And it got to a critical point when I went to special town meeting. It was probably one of the worst times that I'd ever experienced in my tenure, not just as a police chief, but as an officer with the community, seeing where we were with the personnel. So I worry about the people now, and what's going to happen to them if they continue to operate under these stressful conditions. We did have one of our new part-timers that came in, and I haven't been able to do the deep dive on this, but it will be done just to find out why, who works in another community larger than Sturbridge, has police and fire. Their police and fire departments are double the size of ours. However, this individual lives near us and wanted to work part-time here as well. And when she began working in our public safety dispatch center, she couldn't believe how much, and this is what I have to find out, what the definition of much is, and how much that our public safety dispatchers do here in Sturbridge, meaning not just the answering of telephone calls, meaning all the administrative and operational tasks that they perform. And I need to research that and find out what's the difference between this larger community and ours, and why do we have so much weight and responsibility put on our public safety dispatchers right now. What are they doing each day that's different from other communities? And I think that that's important too, because some of that burden of task may be as destructive as having to be alone and answer all those calls. So that's certainly something that needs to be researched, and I'm going to be working on that shortly as well.
So while we're in your operational budget, both sides have mentioned SRO. For your next year's fiscal year budget, you were including the cost of the Tantascwa SRO in there?
Yes.
And are we being reimbursed by Tantascwa for that, or are we carrying the full cost of that again?
Full
I
cost.
believe that we're going to be carrying the full cost again.
It's the only, after many years of attempt, it was the only way we could even get, and even offered it, we offered this before to Tantascwa, and they didn't accept it. They refused to accept it. Now they've accepted it, and we've worked hard for how many years to get this. And I, for one, I think Selectman Dowling feels the same. I don't want to speak for her,
You're
but
correct.
I know we've been at this for a long time together. And with Mr. Morrison, I personally feel that if we're going to protect children in some of these communities, you need to understand, I went to the budget meeting for the Tantascwa, and some of these communities are not even going to be able to meet their allotment for the year. They're having trouble. And there was one in particular, and the school was juggling how they were going to work around it and try to help the community. So if they're struggling to meet their commitment to Tantascwa, and Sturbridge can afford to do it, and we can protect all the children, then I personally don't care where the child comes from. I feel that the SRO serves a great purpose and is needed.
And I think the other side of that, and some of the discussion we had was, we would fund it for the remainder of this year as a starting point, as seed money to kind of get the program going. It seems like Tantascwa has changed its approach and has accepted the need for the SRO. And so with that, it seems like it makes more sense to include that in their budget, or have them include that cost to the extent that they can, now that they've been accepted the SRO up there, versus have one town support that. But I
Isn't in their
understand
budget this
what's
year.
in the
Yeah,
budget.
and I
That's
can't
what my
speak
question
for
was.
Tantascwa wholly. I know that, and hopefully we continue to work in this direction. We are developing a district-wide school resource officer program that encompasses all the 5 communities from K through 12. And the contribution side that was never in existence before, where Sturbridge was the hub at the high school of the program with our full-time SRO there, each community now, through Tantascwa, is going to be contributing a set number of hours for their school resource officer up to Tantascwa, so that we have a program where we're interacting and interchanging these SROs with each one of the communities, so that the town of Brookfield is not seeing the program until they get to the junior high school. They're seeing the program in their elementary school, and they're seeing the officers' faces, they're seeing the communities involved, and we're carrying that throughout the district, and we're trying to have a district-wide response plan in place, establishing some policies that are going to cover all the communities with the mutual aid agreement as well for that. So I'm hoping that that in-kind match, if you will help contribute towards the cost of our officers, and also we are being credited with the 2 positions, the 2 SRO positions that we have. We are being credited for those through the assessment at Tantascwa as well, for the cost of those officers. So that cost is being recognized as our contribution to the district for those 2 positions, which I think was something that was overlooked in the past, that we didn't realize that we were being credited for that position, now for those positions.
Where in their budget are they crediting us that? I didn't.
I think they're using it towards net school spending.
Oh.
The calculation for contributions from the town that aren't necessarily in their budget.
Oh, okay.
So health insurance would be the same type of thing, Worcester Regional, anything that we're assessed that we pay for on the town side of the house.
Oh, okay. So is there a dollar amount from the other towns? If I were to look at the Brookfield budget, would there be something there?
I don't have the dollar amount. I think that that's somewhere in Tantascwa's budget. I'd have to go and talk to the business agent up there to see if I could get those numbers.
I mean, I haven't seen it in the Tantascwa budget, because we were at the public hearing the other night. I did not see anything in there.
It may not be identified as specifically. It may be it may be encompassed in a safety and security account, or safety and security line item. I'd have to check with the business agent
Okay.
to be assured of that. Were there any other questions or concerns or thoughts on the manpower proposal request that I submitted?
I just have, excuse me, one more clarification, Tom. I thought I heard, so in here it says 6 full-time dispatchers and 4 part-time, but I thought I heard you say something.
We had 2 resignations.
You have 2 what?
We had 2 resignations of the part-timers. At the time that that document was submitted, that was what our current staffing was. The staffing has changed in the short months since that was written.
So you have 6 full-time and,
And now 6 part-time. 7 part-time.
so does that mean, are you still looking for 4?
Full-time.
And I assume if you add 4 full-time, you may not necessarily need 7 part-time in your budget. You might be able to cut back on the part-timers because you got more.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And half of those part-timers are college students that are destined for better, more lucrative careers in the future.
Don't undersell the position when you're trying to fill it.
More reward? I just really, I can't, I'm in a box now, I can't.
A different position. or permanent.
Okay.
Full-time,
Well, it's
yeah,
better
a
than the
full-time
others.
position.
I like that.
With their education.
Could you elaborate a bit on the effort about the regional dispatch and a little bit of background for those of us who aren't aware?
We recently participated in a regional dispatch proposal that went a considerable distance, the farthest distance that we've ever participated in. And it started with 5 communities, it rose to 6. And then by the end of the phase of the process, each town slowly backed out for one reason or another, and as the numbers diminished, the viability of having a regional pact together, a regional pact, and having it be something that was going to be efficient, not only from a cost savings, but from an operational standpoint, those aspects diminished as well with that. So I would not want to go and just jump in with another regional dispatch center that's already established, only because of the size of our community and our call numbers. I would like to look for a partner that would be committed, another community nearby that would be committed in regionalizing our dispatch center, something that we could establish and develop where it was its own entity, its own public safety dispatch center with its own command staff, its own command structure, and have a board of overseers of police and fire chiefs and town officials for that, something that would be attractive enough where other communities that are in our place would look to come towards the regional center. I think it's where there's state fundings available, state fund seed monies available for it. I think it would be beneficial for us, not only from the operational side, but from the equipment side, because as you'll hear from the fire chief and I, there's certainly some issues with our communications right now, and those monies would really help, or a regional dispatcher would help with our communication issues, because there was something we were anticipating. If some of you may recall that when they did the radio studies of the 6 towns that were involved, we had the worst radio system and the worst coverage. Right now, we're going to benefit the most from the operational side of that, for the radio equipment. So it's my hope that, in talking with some of the neighbors here, that we may want to relook or look at another community that may be interested in partnering with us, or maybe a third community that may want to look towards regionalizing.
So it sounds like regardless of your staffing of our own dispatch, your intent is still pursue a
It
regional
is,
solution.
but we want a solution that's going to satisfy the needs of the community and quell any fears that people may have about the thought of regionalizing, and something that's going to be beneficial to this community, to the communities that we share that partnership with, just for the public safety communication aspect of what we need, of the police and fire and EMS. And the state is pushing it. The state has been pushing it, as everybody knows, for several years. They tell us regularly that eventually the public safety answering points, meaning where the 911 calls come in, are going to be forced to regionalize. They're going to be forced to partner because unlike anywhere else in the country, Massachusetts has more public safety answering points in the state than most other states combined because we've had just so many individual PSAPs, and they want to bring those numbers together and reduce them. And there's been a lot of successes in regionalization throughout the Commonwealth. There's been a lot of failures as well. There's been millions and millions of dollars spent in studies and spent in startups that have really taken off and others that have failed. So it's something that I think that we need to look into, and given our location and given how proactive we are as a community, you know, I think it's something that we should be leading and help directing and try to attract some of our neighbors to get on board with that, because I think the communities that are all around us right now, with the exception of Holland, Brimfield, Wales, and the Brookfields, those are all covered by state police dispatch. The towns of Charlton, Southbridge, Spencer, the larger communities who all have their own individual PSAPs, I think that we should certainly look at that direction and look at trying to combine our efforts and still have a good product and still have everybody in the community feel like they know that their calls are being answered and they know that they're going to get the services that they need. I think that there's a lot of fears out there that they're not going to have that local connection, which is really not true, because a lot of the dispatch centers are manned by the dispatchers that are leaving these other communities and going there. So I was skeptical at first when it first came around, and now I'm a very strong proponent of it.
Thank you. And just to get timing and perspective, my sense is this is a concept, an idea, you're in early stages, even if you had some momentum going and support from other communities, it's probably we're talking couple years before that gets implemented and put in place, which doesn't address the immediate concern you say you have in the dispatch area.
At least 3 years out, right. And, you know, we spoke about that when we were talking about regionalizing, that if we didn't regionalize, what would happen? And, you know, this is one of the obligations that we were warned about, that we would have to deal with the staffing, the radio. I mean, our public safety complex, it's hard to believe, is 30 years old this year. Yeah, that's what I said. And there's a lot of stuff inside of it that's been replaced, but there's a lot that isn't. Our radio system has just had Band-Aid over Band-Aid over Band-Aid put on top of it, and pretty much everything in there, you can't replace, it can't be repaired or replaced, or repaired, or it has to be upgraded or replaced, essentially. It's everything we have in there is pretty antiquated. And so those issues are going to start presenting themselves as we continue with failures, but each failure is 10,000 or 50,000, then another Band-Aid and another Band-Aid, another Band-Aid. You know, like anything else, we probably would have been better off spending the money up front instead of spending it over the course of 5 or 6 years. So the fire chief and I have been looking at options for the radio system and also discussing the dispatch regionalization aspect of our, you know, dealing with our communications issues. Are there any questions on any of the changes in the lines on the operational side?
Just a quick question on the reduction to the overtime that you mentioned.
Yes.
Does that mean you're going to put it elsewhere?
No.
So that'll come out of your budget?
Yes.
That'll come out of this?
Out of this number that is before you, yes.
A question, if I could please, on page 23 of the detailed budget, there is a purchase of services. but it's website maintenance, which goes from 360 to 0. I'm just wondering if that actually is a centralization of everybody's website maintenance. So all the departments now would be 0 and you'd have it in one place, or something else.
That website maintenance was for emergency management,
Oh, okay, thank you.
and we've since resolved that with some of the changes and upgrades that we've had to our own townwide website.
Right, thank you.
Do you want to talk about your requests under betterment and capital if no one has other questions on the operating budget?
Has everybody had a chance to look at the betterment and the capital requests? If so, are there any questions, any information, anything that you'd like to learn about, or have questions about, agree with or disagree with?
I think it might be helpful to talk about the drone, because I see that as possibly an item of discussion.
Okay.
And while everyone's in the room at the same time.
I put in for a public safety drone this year. I think that the technology that's available to us today that we hadn't had in the past, I think that we should, again, be forward-thinking, take advantage of the opportunities that are available to us. The public safety drone, training monies are included in my budget for training a pilot for the public safety drone. There are numerous uses and applications in public safety, but in other aspects of town departments that can be utilized with a drone. And this particular model and equipment and payload that is on this drone includes the forward-looking infrared device. So, you know, we've got hundreds and hundreds of acres of recreational land in the community with trails. While we're doing a great job at marking off the trails and mapping the trails, you know, we still have people that get lost out on those trails. And while we have a K-9 unit in town, that's a great help. We have police officers, we have search and rescue trained people as well. This is just another tool towards the advancement of those particular public safety entities. And with that, it's the infrared camera on that piece of equipment. Obviously, in the hands of a trained pilot, is going to be able to locate and identify a missing person, a person that may be fleeing from the police that's a criminal. The infrared may also be used by the fire department if the fire department has a structure fire, and they can take that drone and fly it around 360 degrees around the building from top to bottom, taking and collecting data in the form of pictures, as well as determining through the infrared the hot spots that are in the building, so that you're not sending a firefighter into a dangerous situation. They'll know where to direct the streams of the water that they're putting onto the fire. So it can assist during those times when we have structures that are unsafe in the community. The building inspector could utilize the drone with the assistance of the pilot to do, again, a 360-degree view of the structure from top to bottom, so you're not having to send a person in there to take a chance on an unsafe floor or unsafe roof, etc. So there are many other applications where I think that the uses are going to be endless for the community, but I'd like to have it start out with the public safety uses, but I envision it being utilized community-wide. It's a great tool for us to utilize annually for the Pan Mass Challenge, for surveillance purposes, just for the overflights and for be able to take the photographs, the pictures, et cetera, of the number of people that we have over there. It just enhances our security when we're conducting that program before they come and go. If we have an incident in our community where somebody may be barricaded, or we may have to call in a tactical team, this is another tool that's going to give us, again, 360 degrees, top to bottom view of the building. Going back to the trails and conservation, if they want to go out and map the trails, they want to go over and take an overview and to be able to cover more ground and to use as a tool to help assist them. And planning and other departments, you know, certainly a trained pilot will know all the FAA regulations and restrictions and requirements, to get all the licensure, the proper permissions, the proper flight plans that are established, the proper airspaces to be used, et cetera. While there's a lot to it, I think that there's a number of benefits. And considering the cost, it may seem high for a piece of equipment, but I think given the technology, I think that it's certainly going to be something that will be beneficial to our community. And also, we're members of the Central Mass Law Enforcement Council, the consortium of all the 72 communities in Worcester County, with some additional communities in Hampshire and Middlesex County that participate in SEMLEC. SEMLEC currently has a SWAT team, an accident reconstruction unit. It also has a K-9 unit and a motorcycle unit. And recently, they just started up a drone unit, or an unmanned aircraft unit, or unmanned aircraft systems unit. So we would hope to participate with that team as well for search and rescue deployments, for accident reconstruction. It's my understanding that with the proper technology, that the amount of time that is spent by an accident construction team is almost cut in half with the measurement components of it, and the time that the roads shut down. When they make certain marks on the roadway, they can plot those marks by air, and then come back and do the reconstruction in a different hour a day and get the traffic flowing and move the traffic along that may be stopped from a particular fatal accident or serious crash. So there's a multitude of uses for this piece of equipment, and it was my suggestion this year that the town of Sturbridge adopt the program and get involved and see if we can't get a drone program off the ground from a public safety standpoint.
What is the life of a drone these days, both as far as the technology of them goes and just the, sustainability of the object itself?
I think that all depends on how good the pilot is. My thoughts are that we get in the advice that I've received from people that are very proficient in the drone programs, that we get a second drone, so we always have two, because I was told inevitably there's always going to be some kind of an issue with the piece of equipment, whether it's a battery issue or mechanical issue, or if there's a crash that involves it that has to be repaired. As far as the longevity of the equipment, I don't know how long they last. I don't know the answers to that question. I would have to go back and talk to people that have purchased them. Some of the teams that I'm aware of have had their equipment for 5 or 6 years now, the same pieces of equipment. They've had to repair them and upgrade them. I'm hoping that with the level of technology that this particular unit has, I'm hoping that some of it can be upgraded almost like a computer is, where they can be plugged in and upgraded with some upgrades. So I'm hoping to get 5 years out of it or more. And again, it all depends upon the uses, and then hoping that we don't have any casualties or any issues with it.
And did you say that you've already put into your budget the training
Yes.
for this? So there wouldn't be any additional monies that you'd be looking for?
The money that we forecasted for the cost of training a pilot for this is included in our training budget for this year.
I'm good.
Questions about the pilot, would that be a specific role for an individual, or a qualification that could be across the board? Because I'm concerned the drone may be available, but the operator may not be 24/7.
Right. I'm hoping that, well, my vision is that it's a public safety employee, someone from the police department, but I also would like someone from the fire service as well to be cross-trained, so that we do have that availability. I'm hoping that we have other partners that get involved. When we're talking about airspace issues, the reason is we have to have someone that's a government official that's utilizing the drone at certain times for certain types of flyovers and certain permissions, night flights and certain things like that. So I want to make sure that we have a police and fire so that, you know, we do have that redundancy built in, if you will, for coverage.
Is there any distinguishing marks on the drone that identify it as a public or law enforcement, as opposed to, you know, somebody's recreational drone?
No. Each drone, just like an airplane, is going to be given numbers, and those numbers are displayed on the sides of the drone, the registration numbers with the FAA. So they only be distinguished if somebody could take the numbers down and write them in.
I'm just curious if other communities have had any issues with people reporting nuisances for this type of drone
Yeah,
activity and not realizing it's actually.
Unfortunately, Massachusetts doesn't have any privacy laws or any have established any no-fly areas for recreational or hobby drones. And, you know, while of course, like any other government entity, we're strictly, you know, there's so many restrictions for governmental agencies involved in the use of these types of aircraft that I don't think that we'd have any nuisance calls for the public safety one. And I think that we would have the ability to do an all-call if we're doing a search and rescue operation, that we would be able to notify neighbors left and right if we happen to be dealing with a building. I think the activities that are going to be involved, the activities that this would be involved with, would already be an ongoing public safety incident. So I think people would be aware not just only visually by it, but if there was a need for the all-call, they would get notified through their email or text messages.
State police have this capability right now?
On a limited capacity, I believe that the only state police drones that they have are for their CARS unit, which is their collision accident reconstruction teams. I don't think that they have, I don't think, but I'm not positive whether or not they have it that's accessible right now for search and rescue and all the other community-wide needs. We've never had a public safety drone at Pan Mass. You know, while we've had EOD from federal, state, and otherwise, and all different kinds of security efforts over there, we've never had a public safety drone. So this would be a new addition to our safety protocols over there.
Yeah, there's a larger, they call them helicopters.
Yeah, they do have they do. We're not there yet, maybe in another 4 years.
Could this also be something surrounding towns might ask for support to use?
Well, this is the support would come through if it would be for public safety, it would come through SEMLEC. So they would make the call to the SEMLEC unit control chief for the team to be deployed. And it may not be Sturbridge, but it may be Sturbridge. It may, I think that team currently has 6 pilots attached to it right now, and that's going to grow because the program is only in its first 8 months right now.
Are there any protocols in place for Fourth Amendment issues? Search and seizure?
There are recommended policies, there are boilerplate policies already established for privacy issues. And as far as some of the laws with respect to search and seizure, it's one of those uncharted areas that there hasn't been any case law yet or any laws that are out there. However, the privacy policies are very strict with respect to the data that's captured in any type of these flyovers, whether, you know, it could be flying over somebody's backyard or somebody's pool, et cetera. Those restrictions are in those model policies that the FAA has put out, and the FAA has already increased some of their own regulations. So when you're flying the drone, you're flying under FAA regulations, so therefore you have to adhere to some of the rules that they've established. That may answer to that. You know, I think the challenges are going to come is
later,
when they're involved in an enforcement effort.
Right.
And that's when I think the true challenges are going to come, as opposed to they've already got regulations in place when you're flying over what can't be public and what has to be either destroyed or not shown, et cetera.
Do any other local departments have this capability in
I think
place?
the closest one to us right now is Oxford. Maybe East Brookfield.
Yeah. In your presentation, you mentioned the word crash, and in casualty. I'm wondering about liability insurance. If you're registering an aircraft, you have to have insurance.
Yes, there is a separate policy available, and
How much would that cost?
well, I have to get a copy of the policy. I don't have a number available for you, but it is a separate policy, and I don't think that Maya is going to cover it. I think that you have to go outside of Maya and get there's a separate insurer out there, and I would defer to my brother chief in Oxford to get a copy of the policy that his community has.
That's correct. It is
I just wanted,
separate policy.
there might be some additional expense for.
Yes.
And I can imagine the policy's not going to be inexpensive. I think
I'd have to go and see.
Yeah.
I don't think it's so expensive that it defeats the purpose of the program.
No, I don't think so either.
Just that is correct. It is a special policy.
Yes.
And I did talk to Maya about it. They do not cover it, but there's umbrellas.
But there may be a time now, if this program continues to evolve and more communities have this program in place, Maya may take a look at covering it as they do with all the rest of our equipment.
Sure.
Joni?
So, right off the bat, you can see where having, I guess you're calling them pilots?
Yes.
So you'll have a pilot on the
Yes.
police, and then there'll have to be one on fire, right? Because you mentioned
I hope there
that-
will be, yes.
I mean, I can see that it would benefit if there's a fire, God forbid, right?
Yes.
Is there a potential that this would impact, like, the overtime? Like, what if are you only gonna have one person, or this person, and what if this one's not working and this one is, and,
The testing, the certifications, and the training that are required, I think are too overwhelming to have many people trained in that aspect. So I think that between the departments, I think that, like any other specialty, I think that we'll be able to manage our budgets we'll manage the operations within the constraints of our budgets.
but you mentioned that you already have that one pilot, I'm assuming, incorporated in your training.
Just for the training,
That's just one person. You're not paying for the fire, are you?
no.
So I'm assuming, we'll talk to the other.
And that may not
chief.
occur till next year. That may not be till 2021, where he's asking for the training money for somebody to come on.
So that's something that he would have to ask.
Because I didn't want
separately.
to go to him now before we have something established. Once we have something established and one person trained, then I would reach out to the fire side to have someone come over there.
So then, if you have one pilot, and assuming that he or she gets a certification, has to have a certification to use it?
Yes.
Is that right? Does that mean that he or she can't train somebody else to use it, and, like, how does that work?
Well, yes, they can do a field training program. However, it'll be incumbent upon the next person to have to take the exam, have to submit for the certification, have to get the flight hours in, et cetera. There is a capability to do a train-the-trainer-like program. But again, it's training money, it's time. It's going to have flight time, it's going to have time studying, the time to take the examination, the time to get the certification.
So then, I guess it leads me to believe that only the certified pilots can use this drone in an official capacity.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
But the official capacity could be something community-wide. It could
Oh, yeah,
involve,
no, I
it could
understand.
involve the recreational.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
could involve trails, it could involve building, it could involve police and fire.
But to your point, yes, if the person is not on duty.
Right,
when
who's gonna do
whatever
it?
happens, there would be overtime involved if you had to call that individual in.
Right.
Right, I think that's what she was asking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, yes. So, there's gonna be overtime unless it's on duty. And we hope that it's successful enough where we could get a day shift and an evening shift, fire shifts available, so that we could have more people involved and more people capable of utilizing the tool.
Why don't you talk about the guns too, because the simunition guns.
It's under capital.
Oh, under capital?
Yes.
Few pages in. Oh, I see it.
Got it?
It's in capital.
This training equipment request is for simunition weapons and ammunition through the Smith & Wesson M&P Blue Gun program. What this is the sidearms, the firearms that we carry to work each day are Smith & Wesson M&P 45 caliber semi-automatic firearms. These 5 guns would be used for training, and they act and react just like our current firearms, except for what they shoot is more like a paintball, except for it's a round, it's a piece of ammunition that comes out that strikes a person or an assailant, somebody that the police officer may be engaged with. It pretty much simulates a live fire exercise. And we would want to utilize this in a training capacity where an officer, if he or she was ever placed into a situation where they'd have to draw their firearm and have that, take that deadly force option, if the accuracy under a stressful situation, we go to our qualification range twice a year and essentially qualify with 50 rounds of ammunition in a static setup. I mean, we do get down on one knee, we do lay down in a prone position, we do shoot from a strong hand and from a weak hand. We do shoot at a paper target that's a bottle target that simulates, the silhouette of a human. And we have to give commands, and we try to make it as real life as possible. There's parts of the exercise where you have to jog up to a certain point and then draw and fire. There's other aspects of it where you have failure in your weapon, where you have a stoppage and you have to clear that stoppage and still re-engage. However, there's no such thing as a live fire exercise and bringing in real life training. There are simulators that the Academy has, which are audio and visual simulators that have worked and are successful, but they're not always as accessible as we may need them. What this would give us would be 5 training weapons that would be capable of shooting these rounds of ammunition that are small little paint bullets, the protective gear, and so that we could simulate a motor vehicle stop where someone came out after the officer with a knife trying to get after the officer. Someone came out of a car with a firearm shooting at the officer, where the officer had to engage that person with deadly force. So this would be for training in those deadly force encounters, and for nothing more than making the officers more proficient in the use of that one tool that's going to save his or her life or the life of others. So the request for this came down through the staff. Every year I ask the staff, the members of the department, to put in thoughts that they may have about equipment for capital and betterment, and this is one of the top requests that we got from our membership at the police department. So I'd take any questions about this request.
Yeah. Of the $7,600, how much is the simulation, the 5,000 rounds? Approximately. Is it, the rounds of ammunition are technically expendables and not capital expense.
I would have to, I don't have it broken down that way. I have it broken down, I don't have it broken down, it's just in the package itself, so I'd have to, if you'd give me an opportunity to do the quick math, I've got the cost of the ammunition here, and I've got the cost of the weapons, so. Are you trying to separate the ammunition out?
It's just an expendable item that's, you're going to have to buy more each year. As part of, it should be a part of the normal budget, the ammunition and the, the equipment is capital.
And also included in here are 5 sets of the safety gear as well. Is that something I could break down at a later time?
Oh,
and provide you?
I just brought the question about how much of the, my question was how much of this is actually capital expense and how much is
It's because I have the
operating
protective,
expense.
I have the protective gloves and mask and helmet,
Yeah.
et cetera, that I have to break out of this. I do have the price listing here.
Yeah.
And it's all collectively put into one, but I don't have it broken down per.
It just seemed like
And
the
the cost of
request,
the magazines.
the request is partial capital and partial operating.
I can
And I don't-
pull out the ammunition cost from that and just leave the remaining amount in there.
And as the initial purchase, I don't really have a serious problem with that, but I just wanted to point out there'll be operating expenses
In the future for the replacement of the ammunition, yes. Sorry, I don't have that for you.
Chief, is it the department's responsibility to come up with these scenarios that the training would actually be used in with this equipment?
Yes. It would be our firearms instructors that would be participating in this, and we would probably use members of the Semlec SWAT team as not only instructors, but as role players as well.
The use of deadly force seems to be a more hot topic in the public eye nationwide. And I think, increasing officers' capability when it comes to that deadly force option is certainly worth investing in, but could this type of training also be used to practice de-escalation techniques and reinforce the need for restraint in certain situations? In other words, does every scenario have to be about improving the lethality of the skill of using deadly force? But could it
Absolutely.
also be used to address the issue when it is and when it is not appropriate to exercise that option?
Absolutely, and that would be part of the training protocols, especially in today's day and age where we are dealing with more emotionally disturbed persons, people that are in mental health crises. Right now, the lieutenant and I are in the process of obtaining a grant so that all of the members of our department are trained in crisis intervention training, so that when they go to deal with a person that's in that situation, that may have a knife, that is static and not aggressing, that we're able to have the capabilities and the training to know how to deal with the escalation and de-escalation of that. It's a very important component of our training now, is the de-escalation and escalation of training. Not only would this deal with that violent encounter, but it would also deal with those exercises of what do we do and not do. And we have been very progressive in Sturbridge. For many years, we've also had what was called beanbag rounds. We have a shotgun in our police cars that is designed for a less lethal option, so that if we do have somebody in that situation, they can get hit with the bean bags, get stunned, be taken into custody, as opposed to using a deadly force option. And recently, now it's been 5 years since we went over to the electronic control weapons, or the tasers, as another non-lethal use when we're in that type of encounter, so that our officers are not getting themselves in a physical encounter with somebody, that it's another option that we have available to us. And again, we have more private, in our community as well, we have more private homes that are being converted into facilities for residents that have emotional problems, that have mental deficiencies, et cetera, that we have to respond to them, people when they're in crisis. So that training is going to be a very important part of this. However, we want those officers to know that, you know, not to be pushed against the wall, but know what their capabilities are in those scenarios, when it is an actual deadly force encounter and when it's not. So that's a great question, and those scenarios will be built in.
Oh, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else? Chief, anything else?
I just want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for your continued support, as always. I appreciate you coming out on your Saturdays every year, and many of you have been at this for a long while, so I can never thank you enough. You've all been greatly supportive of us, and you continue to be. So for that, I'm thankful, and I wish you all a good day and a great weekend.
Same to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Same to you. Barbara?
Are there any other questions from anybody? Ms. FinCom, don't leave because we do have a reserve fund transfer for you to do. Maybe the selectmen can either stay or dissolve your meeting. It's two different posted meetings, but.
Okay. If anyone wants to stay, they can stay, otherwise.
I'll make a motion. Oh,
Go ahead.
I was going to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Okay, thank you.
No,
Fast enough, good.
no, the adjourn eluded me.